What's up, everybody? My name is Scott Waters. Welcome to No Life to Metal. Going to be doing part 2 of my albums that define heavy metal, the 70s edition. Part 1 was my top 10 picks, my personal picks. This one is, I asked a total of 40 people, 41 including my top pick. So 41 people, and I got a total of 24 answers. So we've got a top 24 here of albums that define heavy metal. And the people that I asked here, you'll know a lot of these names. They're metal musicians. They're people that are well known on YouTube. They're just metal people. People who know metal. So we're going to start off with number 24, picked by Steve BOUDOIN, or the Harmless Rebel on YouTube. And he picked RIOT-ROCK City. And I'm glad someone picked RIOT in this list because they deserve to be in here. This is 1977. My list, I picked Narita from 1979, but regardless, this is a great album too. The difference, I think Narita was a little bit heavier than this album, and this one is a little more on the hard rock side, whereas Narita definitely was over into the metal side of things. But I mean, is there really any doubt that Warrior is just a killer metal song from this album? I mean, it's one of the greatest metal songs of all time, in my opinion, so it's just a good pick. In my opinion, hard rock and heavy metal were synonymous terms. I mean, they were synonymous terms in the 70s, you know. If you read the little definition from the beginning of this video from Grooves 1978, it said that metal is the hardest of hard rock. And that's basically what it was. People can deny all they want to that these bands were heavy metal, but the fact of the matter is, in the 70s, they were considered as such. So, next up, we've got picked by Alex Cantwell, who is the bassist, and I believe also plays guitar in the Desert Doom band, Red Mesa. This is Black Sabbath, Volume 4. No surprise, somebody in a Doom band would pick this album. This is a fantastic album. I mean, this could have easily been on my album. Any of the first 4 Sabbath albums, any of the Ozzy Sabbath albums could have made this list, honestly. But yeah, this thing reads like a greatest hits all by itself. Wheels of Confusion, Tomorrow's Dream, Changes, FX, Supernaut, Snowblind, Cornucopia, Laguna Sunrise, St. Vitus Dance, and Under the Sun. Fantastic album. Great pick from Alex. Number 23. Sorry, number 22. Yeah, there's no way this band couldn't be in here, and they are, of course. This is Judas Priest, Sin After Sin, picked by Kevin KOHLHASE, or the Metal War God. Metal War God is WARGOD 60 on YouTube. He also runs Metal War God Radio, and he's just a lifelong metal fanatic and a collector. And what better record to pick than Sin After Sin? I think this is one of the most underrated Judas Priest albums. I mean, this thing paints such an awesome musical tapestry between the melancholy moments of stuff like Last Rose of Summer and even the melodic cover of Joan Baez's Diamonds and Rust, to the super heavy stuff like Starbreaker, Sinner, and Dissident Aggressor, which has been covered by Slayer of all people. So fantastic album. This was their 3rd studio album, their first for a major label. Judas Priest, Sin After Sin. Number 21, picked by Carcass John, who does the Metal Round Table on YouTube. And Carcass John picked Deep Purple in Rock. Again, when I did my top 10, I said I could have went with either In Rock or Machine Head. I ended up going with Machine Head just because of Ian Gillan's vocals in the album, how much great screaming he does. But this album is equally as great. Not a bad song on here. This has got Speed King, Bloodsucker, Child in Time, Into the Fire, Flight of the Rat, Living Wreck, and Hard Lovin' Man. And what was this album? 1971, somewhere in that area. It's just brilliant, you know. New wave, first wave of British heavy metal, and you know, people can say all they want to. This was not heavy metal, but back then it was considered heavy metal. You don't believe? Look at the periodicals from the time describing the band as heavy metal. Look at any history book on the history of heavy metal. It talks about them being heavy metal, and it wasn't just Deep Purple, or it wasn't just Black Sabbath. It was a combination. It was that whole. There was Black Sabbath, there was Led Zeppelin, and there was Deep Purple, and those 3 bands combined really, to me, are what, you know, made heavy metal. They were the ones who invented the genre. It was the heavy guitars of Black Sabbath. It was the incredible heavy rhythm section of Led Zeppelin from John Bonham and John Paul Jones. It was the guitar wankery of Ritchie Blackmore and the loose, dirty playing of what's his name? Robert Plant. I mean, Jimmy Page. Excuse me. It was the screaming vocals of Robert Plant and Ian Gillan. I mean, it was all that combined. You know, it wasn't just that one band, and that was the first wave of British heavy metal, along with, you know, other bands like Budgie and UFO and whatnot. Speaking of UFO, next band, next album, UFO Obsession. This was number 20, picked by David REECE. David REECE, who, of course, sang for Accept when Udo left, sang for Bangalore Choir, sang for Circle of Silence. Now he tours mostly in Europe and puts out solo albums under the name REECE. And no surprising, he picked this album. Fantastic guitar playing from Michael Schenker. Phil Mogg, one of the great vocalists of all time, one of the most charismatic, instantly recognizable vocalists in my opinion, and just a freaking incredible band. Everything about them. Pete Way's bass playing. I mean, it was, you know, it was more than just one guy in the band. It was the whole band. But yeah, great album. The funny thing is, this is the same album he picked for my 1980s video, and I asked everybody, please, no earlier than 79, no later than 1990, and he still said, nope, I want this one, 1978. This album defines heavy metal to me, so no surprise that he also picked it for 70s. So there you go. Alright, number 19, picked by Ryan Roebuck from MOTIVIK. Oh, just so happened to be wearing my MOTIVIK shirt today, and playing MOTIVIK in the background as well. But he picked the second album from Motorhead, the second official album from Motorhead, Overkill. Again, this was made my list, so glad to see it made another list. Belongs here. I mean, this is the introduction of fast, crazy double bass, almost to the point of being speed metal or thrash. And what was this, 1977, 78, in that area? But you've got the grinding bass, you know, that nasty, dirty Rickenbacker bass from Lemmy. You've got the Fast Eddie Clark's, you know, amazing riffs. And again, this one reads like a greatest hit. So you got Overkill, Stay Clean, I Won't Pay Your Price, I'll Be Your Sister, Capricorn, No Clash, Damage Case, Tear You Down, Metropolis, and Limb from Limb. This album is fantastic. Definitely deserves to be on any list describing heavy metal in the 1970s. One thing I will say about Motorhead, unlike some of the other bands, is Motorhead kind of brought in a punk vibe, and a lot of these other bands did not have any punk vibes, so they were kind of unique in their sound. Next up, we've got number 18, picked by Tanner POPPITT of the thrash band MADROST, and Tanner picked Van Halen 2, coming right in at the end, 1979. But yeah, I think this is a slightly heavier album than 1978's self-titled album, but regardless, a great album. You know, Eddie Van Halen's guitar power techniques helped define heavy metal into the 80s. There's no doubt about that. The stage antics and the showmanship of David Lee Roth, maybe not one of the greatest vocalists of all time, but definitely one of the great showmen of all times and one of the great frontmen of all times. And not to mention, you had a fantastic rhythm section in this band. Not only in the rhythm section, but they were great backing vocalists as well, and really rounded out the band's sound. So, Van Halen 2, Tanner POPPITT, MADROST. Alright, I gotta refer to my list here. Number 17. George Call, who is the singer for ASKA. Actually, that's his band. He's guitarist and singer in ASKA. He also is the singer for Banshee and Cloven Hoof. And he picked Kiss Alive. Great album, can't deny it. I mean, what the band couldn't capture on those, you know, first three albums, that heaviness, that energy, the rawness got captured here. Yeah, it had heavy, supposedly it had heavy touch-ups in the studio. I don't know, that's always been a big controversy. It doesn't matter. What they captured was pure energy, pure, raw, heavy rock and roll, and I couldn't disagree with this pick at all. I mean, everything from the look of the band inspired the heavy metal from decades to come to the sound of the band, and there's no denying it. Songs like Parasite and Strutter and Rock Bottom, and those were just heavy, heavy songs for, you know, what was this, 1975, I think this album came out. Alright, where are we at here? Number 16. First showing from this band, didn't make my list, doesn't mean I don't agree, I do agree. But Alice Cooper, $1 Billion Babies, picked by Dean Kinney. Dean is the drummer, played in a variety of bands, but regardless, Dean picked Alice Cooper and $1 Billion Babies. He actually, when I first asked him, he said Alice Cooper. I'm like, which album? He's like, oh, maybe this one, or maybe this one, or maybe this one. So he had a hard time coming up and sticking with one, but he finally went with $1 Billion Babies. Great pick, great album. I mean, this is another fantastic album. It's another one that reads like a greatest hits from that time period. So you've got Elected, I Love the Dead, I Love the Dead, Sick Things, $1 Billion Babies, and Hello Hooray. Yeah, this is just a fantastic one. And yeah, this is the wallet that opens up and has a little dollar bill inside, and the cards, and yeah, Mike does have all that. This is like this is an old, probably an original pressing. So Dean Kinney, number 16, Alice Cooper, number 15, picked by Steve Gaines. Steve is the guitar player for Anger is Art, but he's also been the singer and guitar player in various bands such as ABBATOIR, Bloodlust, among others. So he picked Black Sabbath, Master of Reality, A Man After My Own Heart. I picked the same album in my top 10. This was very high in my list because it's just such a great album. Unlike the first two Black Sabbath albums, which had the standard E tuning, this album was tuned down a bit, and it just gave it a heavier, darker sound. But then you also have faster tracks like Sweet Leaf. I guess Sweet Leaf's not that fast. It's just got that super heavy riff. That's, I mean, that's just so heavy, so metal. Children of the Grave, After Forever, Solitude, which of course is not quite as heavy, but Lord of this World, the instrumental Orchid, and Into the Void. Great album, great pick from Steve Gaines. Next up was picked by Manny Castillo. Manny Castillo is the vocalist for the 80s power metal band Paradox. Those guys are actually still around. They're recording a new album. Their old stuff was just recently reissued on CD and vinyl. But this is his pick, which is URIAH HEEP. Or Very Easy, Very Humble was released under a couple different names. But yeah, early HEEP was definitely heavy, and their type of heaviness was different. You know, I've in the last video, people were arguing with me, yeah, this band's not as heavy as that band, so therefore they're just heavy rock, they're not heavy metal. You're really kind of, you know, just nitpicking is the word I'm looking for. You know, at the time, what is this, early 70s, 72, 73, somewhere in that area, and this is heavy, and it's not just heavy from guitars, the keyboards are heavy too. You think of keyboards, and people tend to think of that 80s kind of tinkly, glammy keyboard sound that kind of mellowed albums out. Not here. And albums like this and Deep Purple, the keyboards added to the heaviness because it wasn't keyboards, it was organs, and it was heavy, and it gave it that kind of dark, eerie tone. And that's exactly what you get with your great album cover too. I mean, can you get a more metal-looking cover than that? So, anyhow, great pick from Manny Castillo from Paradox. Alright, number 13 comes from Rodney Dunsmore, vocalist from Devastation, thrash band, Texas thrash band Devastation. He picked Judas Priest, Unleashed in the East. Another live album, captures the band live. Yep, again, like Kiss, probably heavily fixed in the studio. Doesn't really matter. It sounds fantastic. It captured something that the band had a hard time capturing in the studio, which was an energy. Again, Priest I mean, to me, Priest defines metal. If I can only pick one band and say that band is heavy metal, Judas Priest would be my pick. I mean, when I did my 80s video, I picked Screaming for Vengeance as my pick. And when I did my 70s video, I picked Stay in Class, so no big surprise. But to me, Judas Priest were the very definition of heavy metal. Not only were they the definition of it, but Judas Priest were one of those first wave British heavy metal bands that really latched onto the term. Where in the 70s, it was kind of, heavy metal was sometimes used as a derogatory thing, you know, for meaning like just noisy bands. Judas Priest latched onto that term, and they ran with it, and then, we are a heavy metal band. Yeah, we are a noisy band. And that's awesome. So they really latched on it and ran with it, and, you know, ran all the way to the bank because they're one of the best, biggest known bands in the world to this day. All right, number 12, picked by Jimmy Brown from the heavy metal band Deliverance. Speed metal, thrash metal, whatever you want to call them. But he picked Black Sabbath, Sabotage, Sabbath making another appearance in the list. No big surprise. Sabbath and Priest have seen a few in here already. But yeah, this is a great album too. I mean, again, I can't really argue with anything in this. Hole in the Sky, Don't Start, Symptom of the Universe, Megalomania, Thrill of It All, Superstars, Am I Going Insane, and The Writ. So, Black Sabbath, Sabotage, again, Ozzy era Sabbath, the forefathers of heavy metal in my opinion. So, fantastic album, fantastic pick from Jimmy Brown. Number 11 comes from Dwayne Stockton, or Lazarus, on the on YouTube. He's probably one of the long-standing members of the what's called the vinyl community on YouTube. If you don't know, he's been around for longer than I have, that's for sure. But anyhow, Lazarus is actually one of the guys who inspired me to start making videos. So I asked him his pick, and he picked a fantastic release. This is Judas Priest, Sad Wings of Destiny, second album from Priest. Yeah, there's just no doubt that this is just one of the greatest heavy metal albums of all time. From the album cover to the songs, everything on here is fantastic. Victim of Changes, Ripper, Dreamer Deceiver, Tyrant, Genocide, Epitaph, and Isle of Domination. Again, you get that kind of tapestry, that weaving of heavy moments with more melancholy moments, and that's one of the things I love about 70s heavy metal. Something that you don't get as much as heavy metal moved on in time. It started getting more refined and more defined, and bands couldn't go outside that box. And that's why a lot of the 70s bands, as the 70s wore on and went into the 80s, they were like, we don't want to be called a heavy metal band because we don't want to be refined into this box. We can't do anything outside of it. In the 70s, they could do a blues part. They could put a jazz interlude in. They could do a mellow acoustic thing in the middle of a heavy song, and it was all good. But as time went on, it was like, oh no, you can't have keyboards in heavy metal. Oh no, you can't do that and call it heavy metal. And people will argue that to this day, that these bands aren't you know, heavy metal. They'll rob them of their heavy metal history because they were more varied and they painted those musical tapestries. It's unfortunate, but anyhow, we move on. Yeah, Sad Wings from Lazarus. Next up, Darren Hildebrandt, also a good friend of mine and a YouTuber. You can find him under the Darren Hildebrandt. Actually, I should have written down his. I think he has a name. I'll have to try to remember to put it down below because he's got a channel name, and I can't remember at the top of my head. I just know him as my friend Darren. So, but yeah, he picked one that was also on my list. Scorpions, German. One of the only German bands to make this 70s list. But the Scorpions, again, I can't disagree at all. I mean, if you watch part 1 of this video, you know why I love this album so much. URIAH is just the man. And it was not just him though. It was a combination. I mean, it was URIAH combined with what's his name? Rudolf Schenker. Gosh, brain fart there. I'm looking at his picture trying to remember what his name is. Rudolf Schenker. It was those two guys combined. So you had that dual guitar thing, you know. And those two guys really offset each other. They were very different players, very different style songwriters, but it all seemed to work together really well. Yeah, and that again, that dual guitar thing was something that was really important for heavy metal in the 70s. You know, bands like Thin Lizzy kind of made it otherworldly, in my opinion. But yeah, Judas Priest again, another one. Aerosmith. There was lots of bands doing that dual guitar thing, but bands like Scorpions really use it to their advantage. All right, next up, we are on number 9. This is Johnny Hawk. Johnny's gone by many names on YouTube. He's still on YouTube as Johnny Hawk. He used to do a lot of heavy metal videos. Now he does a lot of car videos, updating. He's been actually doing a lot of videos doing Jeeps, updating Jeeps. But he also does videos where he plays guitar and whatnot. He doesn't really do collection videos as much. But regardless, look up Johnny Hawk on YouTube. He's a good friend of mine, so I asked his opinion, and he picked AC/DC, Highway to Hell. Bon Scott era AC/DC is my favorite. And a lot of people commented on my part 1. I can't believe he didn't include AC/DC. Well, here they are. They're in this list, and they belong in this list. The Australian Export are just one of the all-time greats. Still putting out music today. Their new album came out about a month ago, and it's still great. But yeah, Highway to Hell, AC/DC. Again, one of those albums that reads like a greatest hits. Of course, Highway to Hell, one of the most overplayed radio songs ever. Girl's Got a Rhythm, Walk All Over You, Touch Too Much, Beating Around the Bush, Shot Down in Flames, Get It Hot, If You Want Blood You Got It, Love Hungry Man, and Night Prowler. Once again, you got a little bit of a musical tapestry going on here. You know, people like to think of AC/DC as every song sounding the same. No, not true. They've got that boogie rock thing going on at times. They've got the blues thing going on at times. They've got that heavy, almost punk vibe going on at times. As a matter of fact, in the 70s, there were times where reviewers call these guys punk. I never really considered it a punk band, but I understand the ethic was there. All right, number 8. So we're getting into our top 8. All right, now all the ones from here on have at least 2 picks. More than one person picked these. So my next pick was by Tony Lee, who was the guitar player for Heathen's Rage, and also he was a guitar player, or he might have been the bass player in the Railroad Jerks. But yeah, in the early 80s, mid-80s, he was the guitar player for Heathen's Rage. And then George Ochoa, who was the guitar player in Recon, Worldview, Deliverance. They both picked a live album, Deep Purple, made in Japan. Yeah, this album really one of the greatest live albums of all times. Again, captured on here was an energy that couldn't be captured in the studio, not just from the band, but somehow, you know, there's something captured from the band feeding off the energy of the crowd, and that's captured onto vinyl here. And of course, it brings all the great songs from those early records, like In Rock, and you know, so you've got Highway Star, you've got Child in Time, Strange Kind of Woman, Lazy, Smoke on the Water, The Mule, and a massive long version of Space Truckin'. Space Truckin' is one of those songs that's been covered by numerous different metal bands, so I can't disagree at all. Fantastic vocals, Ian Gillan, you know, Richie Blackmore's one of the greatest guitar players ever, one of the greatest egos ever as well, but regardless, one of the greatest guitar players. Okay, so this one was picked by Chuck Rion from the Ruins, who are they're from Nevada, a thrash band from Nevada. Great band. If you don't have their new albums, I got it sitting right there. It's a fantastic CD. Speed thrash metal, great band. Also, this was picked by Rob Whitlock, who was the bass player for over a decade in Ultimatum. They picked Hellbent for Leather, aka Killing Machine, depending on where you're from. This happens to be a Killing Machine pressing from Japan, but yeah, I can't deny this is one of my favorite albums of all time. I mean, this easily could have been my number 1 as well. Everything on here is brilliant. I love this album. I mean, songs like Delivering the Goods and Burning Up are just so heavy. Anthrax did a cover of Burning Up. But then you also got Rock Forever, Evening Star, the title track, Take on the World, Running Wild, which of course the band Running Wild named themselves after, Before the Dawn, and Evil Fantasies. So, yeah, great choice from Rob Whitlock and Chuck Rion. All right, next up, picked by Louis Ramirez. Louis Ramirez. Who's Louis Ramirez? He's another friend of mine. Louis ST.AUGUST, who is the singer from Boston heavy metal band Mass. And then also from Glenn Rogers, who is the guitar player. He's most known for playing in Hyrax, but he's also played in Deliverance and Steel Prophet and Heretic and Primal, among others. He's been around a long time. He's one of my favorite guitarists. I call him a riff master, and you know, they both picked Deep Purple, Machine Head, and indeed this is one that made my list. Deep Purple have been on this list, what, 3 or 4 times now? No surprise. Like I said, it's, you know, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath. Those 3 bands, to me, those were the bands that kind of invented heavy metal. You know, they were the first wave of British heavy metal. Couldn't have been a second wave of British heavy metal or a new wave of British heavy metal if there wasn't a first wave. And Deep Purple were indeed one of those bands. So I talk more about it in the first video, but I'll move on to the next one, which was picked by Jeff McCormick, Jeff McRockmick on YouTube, and also Robert Gutierrez, the guitarist from Ultimatum, and I knew he'd pick this one because I knew he's a huge fan of this guitar player, and indeed this album definitely changed heavy metal into the 80s, but 1978, Van Halen's first album. Once again, I said a lot about him when I showed Van Halen 2, but you know, I just remember friends of mine buying this album new in 78 and just jaws on the floor listening to Eruption. Everybody, you know, trying to figure out that tap-on thing, and everybody wanted to play it. And of course it became a staple in the 80s, and once again you got that picture of David Lee Roth in the back. You know, that the showmanship just became essential in the into the 80s, and huge inspiration. Great album. This pretty much is the greatest hits as well. What song is this thing out here? You Really Got Me, which is a cover, of course. Jamie's Crying, On Fire, a great song. Running with the Devil, I'm the One, Ain't Talking About Love, Little Dreamer, Atomic Punk, another great deep cut. Eruption, And then, of course, the joke track, Ice Cream Man. Alright, where are we at here? Alright, last one before we get into our top 3. This was picked by 2 people. This was picked by Dale Thompson, vocalist for Bride, among many other bands, but Bride being his main band that he's known from. And then also Metal Ron Haggerty, who is a YouTube guy, and he's gone under many names. Metal Ron, he was known for a long time. I think he just goes under Ron Haggerty now. But regardless, they both picked Rainbow Rising. Once again, Richie Blackmore in the list again. One of the pioneers of heavy metal guitar playing. If you play in a power metal band, you probably owe a big debt of gratitude to this band. Not only because of the music, but everything about it. It was the showmanship. It was the fantasy lyrics. It was Ronnie James Dio's majestic vocals. One of the all-time great vocalists. You know, one of the icons of heavy metal, along with Rob Halford from Judas Priest and Ozzy Osbourne, and Ian Gillan, all great vocalists. You know, and that's kind of what you got here. Fantastic album. This was their second album, and I think they really just come into their own. Not to mention, this was kind of like a super group with Jimmy Bain, of course, on bass. Jimmy went on to play for decades with Dio, and you've got Kazi Powell on drums. Kazi played a bunch of different bands, but also went on to play with Black Sabbath in later years. So, yeah, great album. Made my list too. So, all right, top 3. We basically got a tie for number 1. All 3 tie for number 1 because each of them got 5 votes each. So 41 people polled, including myself, and each of them got 5 votes. So this first one was picked by Larry Dean, guitarist from Triton, Roger Dale Martin, who was the bass player for Vengeance Rising and Die Happy, Rob Warner, who was the guitar player for Heathen's Rage, Chris Manning, guitarist, solo artist. He also plays in his Led Zeppelin cover band out in Texas. And then, of course, Matthew Hunt, who is the owner of Retroactive Records and Bombworks. Bombworks Records, which is an extreme metal label, and also Boone's Overstock, which is an online site for selling music. And they all picked Black Sabbath. Yep, Paranoid. I was surprised so many people voted for this album. Not because I don't think it's a great album. It is a great album. But I just wasn't expecting that many people to pick this particular album. But yeah, I mean, you got War Pigs, Paranoid, Planet Caravan, Iron Man, Electric Funeral. I mean, this is like, those songs are all like heavy metal defined. Rat Salad and Fairies Wear Boots. So I mean, it didn't hit me at first until I pulled the album and started reading the songs. I'm like, well, yeah, it makes sense. This album totally fits into the number 1 slot. So great pick. Again, Ozzy, the heaviness of Tony Iommi's guitar playing. Fantastic rhythm section. What else can I say? It's Black Sabbath, right? All right, I guess these are all number 1, but this is number 2 in the list. This one was picked by Nope, this one was not picked by Bill Baffert. This one was picked by Jason Ellsworth from the death metal band Angerrot. Shannon Fry from the thrash band Avenger of Blood. Vic Stone, a guitarist from Vindicator. Aaron Morgosian, who is the metal theologian on YouTube. And of course, myself, Judas Priest, making another entry into this one. This is Stained Class. I said a lot about this in my last video. I don't have to say a whole lot about it again. But Exciter, I mean, to me, that was one of the early speed metal songs. It was that song that made, I was already a hard rock fan and a hard heavy metal fan when I heard that. I was a huge Aerosmith, Kiss, and Ted Nugent fan when I picked up this record as a kid. But when I heard Exciter, I can just imagine my jaw was on the floor for the entire song. I had not heard something quite like that. It was heavy. Nugent was heavy, man, and he was wild. But it was a different kind of heavy, and it was a different sound, and it was something that I loved and wanted more of. So there you go. Stained Class coming in at number 2, tied for number 1 actually, and no big surprise on this one. I actually thought this one would win. I actually thought this one would get more votes, but it got 5 votes as well. So Bill Baffert from Rocks, Randy Trog, Mishad, who you might know from my channel, also the guitar player from Troglodyte Dawn, vocalist from Troglodyte Dawn. Also does a radio program and runs a label that focuses a lot on doom stuff. So Metal Rob Caldwell from the other host from the Metal Roundtable, He also is an engineer who does mastering for a lot of bands, a lot of labels. And then Patrick Best from Ritual Servants, thrash band, newer thrash band. And then somebody you might know, Ron Reinhardt from Dark Angel. He also sang for Oil for many years. They all picked this album, no big shock. For many, this is the album that started it all. Many would say that this is the first heavy metal album, recorded in '69, released in 1970, right around the same time as Led Zeppelin's first couple albums were coming out. Again, what can you say? This is heavy metal. Black Sabbath, The Wizard, Wasp, Behind the Wall of Sleep, basically NIB, Wicked World, A Bit of Finger, Sleeping Village, and Warning. With those, this is one of those ones where it's like one song and it has multiple parts with multiple names. But the song is Black Sabbath itself. I mean, most people credit that as being the first true heavy metal song. But again, you got heavy guitar playing from Tony Iommi. You got the otherworldly bass playing of Geezer Butler, Bill Ward's unique drumming style, and of course Ozzy Osbourne on vocals. So there you go, number one. Tied for number one with another Black Sabbath album and Judas Priest, Black Sabbath. So there you go. Thanks you all for watching. Thank you for all the comments from the first video. I hope you all enjoyed this video as well. A little longer because I had a lot more to show, but appreciate you watching. Appreciate you commenting. I try and get back to everybody. That's it. God bless. Stay strong.